Let's be honest for a moment. You've heard it your entire life. Men don't cry. Real men are made of steel, strong, silent, unbreakable. They're taught early that their hearts must be locked behind armor, that vulnerability is weakness, that softness is dangerous. But what if I told you something most people never say out loud? One of the most unforgettable experiences a man can have with a woman is not intensity, not performance, not technique, but the exact moment his defenses finally collapse. Not in shame, not in humiliation, but in relief. Picture this. He's lying there still quiet. His breath catches in his chest, not because of physical overwhelm, but because something inside him has been touched, something no one has dared to approach before. His eyes fill, not with pain, but with release. And somewhere in his mind, a single thought appears. What just happened to me? It wasn't because you followed a script. It wasn't because you recreated a scene from a movie or copied something you read. It happened because you reached a place no one else ever tried to enter. For a long time, women were taught that intimacy is a performance. That value is measured by flexibility, endurance, novelty, by how long you can hold attention, by how impressive you can be. I believed that once, too. I thought men were moved by technique, by novelty, by doing more. But the truth shattered that illusion completely. Men don't crave performance. They crave presence. They don't need another routine. They need a moment so real that it disarms them. A moment where they don't have to do, don't have to prove, don't have to be strong. And yes, sometimes they cry, not because they are weak, but because for once, someone touched the part of them that lives beneath pride, expectation, and silence. The part no one asks about, the part no one sees, the part that has been carrying weight for years without permission to rest. So let me ask you something. What do you think actually makes someone unforgettable? Is it the moves you practiced, the image you curated, the effort to impress, or is it the way you gently disarm someone in a world that taught them never to lower their guard? Men carry their own invisible burdens, the pressure to perform, to provide, to hold everything together, to never falter. They walk into intimacy wearing armor they don't even realize is there. And most people never get past the surface. They collide with that armor. They bounce off. They mistake distance for mystery. But when you learn how to slide past it, when you become the one who makes him feel safe enough to let go, something shifts. You stop being just another chapter. You become the story he never forgets. I used to think intimacy had to be louder, more intense, more dramatic. Now I know it has nothing to do with excess. It's about depth. You don't make a man emotional by overpowering him. You make him emotional by giving him permission to surrender. Think about it. How often does he truly get that chance? How often can he rest without being evaluated, collapse without being judged, feel without having to perform? The world tells men to be warriors. But what if the truth they never say out loud is this? They are waiting for someone who allows them to be human, and that is where your quiet power lives. You don't need to master endless techniques. You don't need to become someone else. You need to master presence, stillness, patience, the ability to hold space without rushing to fill it, so that when he's with you, he doesn't feel like he has to impress. He can just be. And in that silence, something extraordinary happens. His breathing deepens, his walls soften, his body relaxes in a way it rarely does. And for the first time, he understands something fundamental. Intimacy isn't about conquest, it's about surrender. Now think about the last time you felt truly seen, not for your body, not for your role, but for your inner world. Remember how rare that felt, how it was both terrifying and alive at the same time. Now imagine offering that gift to someone else. Imagine being the one person who gives him permission to stop pretending. That is what moves him. That is what stays with him. That is why later, quietly, almost surprised, he whispers something like, "I didn't know I needed that." And that is what makes you unforgettable. If presence and surrender are the real keys, then the question becomes unavoidable. How do you actually create them? How do you move from merely touching his body to unlocking his heart? Because here is the truth. Most people never say out loud, touching a man's body is easy. Touching his heart is rare. And yet it is his heart that determines everything that follows. When a man feels emotionally safe with you, when he senses that you see him beyond appearance, beyond performance, beyond roles, his body doesn't just respond, it surrenders. That is the moment he stops performing, stops holding back, stops managing himself, and instead he melts into the experience. It sounds paradoxical, doesn't it? We live in a culture that worships technique, that teaches women to focus on the external, seduction games, outfits, choreography, timing. But the women men never forget, understand something deeper. Intimacy begins long before a single touch. It begins with time, with energy, with presence. Let me give you a simple example. Think about the way you look at him from across a room. Most people underestimate the power of the gaze, but presence is felt before it is touched. If you look at him with judgment, with expectation, with the silent pressure of "prove something to me," his defenses rise instantly. He may not say anything, he may not even consciously notice, but his body does. His shoulders tighten, his breath shortens, his nervous system prepares for performance. Now imagine something different. You look at him as if he is already enough, as if he doesn't need to impress you, as if he doesn't need to bring anything extra into the room. Something subtle shifts, his shoulders soften, his breathing slows. His body receives a message it almost never hears. You don't have to be perfect here. You don't have to carry everything. You don't have to pretend. And that silent conversation begins. This has nothing to do with the bedroom. It starts in everyday moments, in the way you listen when he's frustrated, without interrupting, without fixing, without correcting, in the way you allow silence to exist without rushing to fill it, in the way you stay present during his storms instead of trying to escape them. Men are rarely given space to feel. The world tells them to be strong, to push through, to shut down, to endure. But if you become the one place where he can exhale, where he can rest without being evaluated, you have already created the foundation for a depth of intimacy he may never have known. I used to believe men didn't want vulnerability, that they hated opening up. I was wrong. Men don't fear vulnerability. They fear being vulnerable with the wrong person. They fear being dismissed, misunderstood, mocked, used against. But when a man senses that he can speak honestly with you, without hesitation, without self-protection, that is when he begins to open. And once he softens emotionally, his physical response becomes something entirely different. He doesn't just offer you his body, he offers you his trust. And trust is the most intoxicating aphrodisiac there. Let this be clear. This is not about weakening him. It is not about diminishing his strength. It is about balance. Men spend their lives being hard, guarded, resilient. When you offer softness, steadiness, and emotional safety, you are not making him smaller. You are giving him a sanctuary, a place where his strength doesn't have to stay on alert. And that contrast, that release of constant tension, is what makes his body respond so deeply. Now, some of you may be thinking, this sounds too simple. Don't I need to do more? Here is the truth. Yes, there are ways to translate emotional connection into physical intimacy. But the first step is not doing more. It is doing less. Less rushing, less urgency, less performance, more intention, more awareness, more presence. Instead of asking, what can I do to impress him? Ask yourself, what can I feel with him right now? Because when you are fully present, he feels it. And more men than you realize are starving for that presence. Think of intimacy like music. Anyone can play notes, But not everyone can create resonance. Resonance comes from timing, from silence, from feeling what comes next before it arrives. And when a man feels that kind of attunement with you, something profound happens inside him. He stops guarding, stops measuring, stops bracing, and in that quiet space, he realizes something that surprises even him. For once, he doesn't have to perform to be wanted. He can simply exist, and that is how you touch his heart long before you ever touch his body. It is the silence between the notes that makes a melody unforgettable. Anyone can create sound. Few know how to create pause. Your touch, your breath, your energy, these are the rhythm. But your stillness, your patience, your willingness to linger, that is the silence that undoes him. Because there comes a moment when something shifts in his chest. The way his arms tighten around your back is no longer about possession. It becomes anchoring, grounding, a quiet act of holding on to the safety you've created. And yes, this is often the moment when tears come, not because he is weak, but because he is finally unarmored. When a man feels seen without judgment, touched without expectation, allowed to soften without losing respect, something ancient inside him breaks open. Not pain, release. Release from years of performing. Release from the pressure of always being strong. Release from a loneliness he didn't even know he was carrying. And you are the one who offered him that moment. So ask yourself, honestly, are you willing to slow down? Are you willing to lean in far enough to hear what isn't being said? Are you willing to be not only a partner in passion, but a partner in presence? Because the truth is simple and uncomfortable. The most unforgettable moments never happen in a rush. They happen when time seems to stretch, when breath deepens, when nothing is being forced. And if you learn how to wait, to breathe, to linger, you become the woman he never forgets. But this leads us somewhere even deeper. Once you have built the foundation of safety and trust, how do you translate that into physical connection that doesn't just excite him, but moves him? Because here is an essential truth. Safety alone is not enough. Yes, he must feel safe, but safety without desire becomes companionship, warmth without fire. So what makes him cry afterward? What makes him whisper that you are unforgettable? It is the alchemy of safety, blended with anticipation, softness woven together with heat, and this is where most women have never been taught their true power. We were taught to focus on appearance, on looking sexy, on performing well. But real seduction does not begin with performance. It begins with presence. Think about how you touch him before you touch him, the brush of your hand along his arm as you lean closer, the pause, just a second longer than expected, before your lips meet his, the silence that stretches long, enough to make him ache. Most people rush through these moments. We assume men want speed, we assume they want immediacy, but men are far more sensitive than they admit. They feel energy before they feel skin. And when you create space for anticipation, when you allow him to drown slowly in expectation, you awaken something in him that no technique ever could. I once believed that the faster things escalated, the more exciting they became. I was wrong. What truly feeds desire is restraint. The art of waiting, the deliberate choice to move slower than his mind expects. Imagine your lips hovering a breath away from his, long enough for him to feel the heat without contact. Imagine your fingertips tracing the outline of his hand without fully claiming it. These moments stretch desire like a drawn bow, and when release finally comes, it is overwhelming. This is not about teasing to control. It is about teaching him the sweetness of surrender. And here is the paradox most people never realize. When you slow down, when you refuse to rush, you are actually in complete control of the rhythm. You set the pace, you shape the atmosphere, you invite him to meet your energy instead of chasing his. And believe this, men feel it. They may not articulate it, they may not name it, but their bodies respond. Their breathing changes, their movements soften, their awareness sharpens. They stop reaching forward and begin to arrive. Because when a man senses that he is not being rushed toward an outcome, but invited into an experience, his nervous system relaxes, and in that relaxation, desire deepens. This is how safety becomes passion, not by adding more stimulation, but by removing urgency, not by doing more, but by allowing more. Presence is not passive. It is intentional stillness, and stillness, when infused with warmth, is magnetic. This is where intimacy transforms from an act into a shared state, where he is no longer trying to get somewhere, no longer trying to prove something. He is simply there, with you, and in that space, his body stops leading. His heart does. That is why the most powerful touch often comes after the pause, why the quiet moments linger longer in memory than anything loud or dramatic, because you did not overwhelm him. You met him, and once a man experiences intimacy like this, where safety and desire coexist, where softness and intensity are not opposites but partners, he carries it with him. He remembers how it felt to finally rest, inside presence, and that is why he never forgets you. His body begins to respond before he even realizes it, not because you did something impressive, not because you followed a script, but because he senses something rare. You are not performing, you are creating, and that distinction changes everything. Now let's talk about what happens during the moment itself. So many women slip into a quiet anxiety here. Am I doing enough? Does he like this? Should I change something? That is performance, energy, and men feel it instantly. The moment you leave your body and enter your head, a subtle distance appears. The connection thins, intimacy begins to dissolve. But when you stay grounded, when your breathing remains slow, when your movements are unhurried, when your eyes meet his with calm certainty, something deeper than words is communicated. Without saying a thing, you are telling him, I'm not here to impress you. I'm here to be with you. And in that quiet confidence, he begins to surrender. But how does surrender lead to tears? Here is what most people never understand. A man's body is conditioned to do, to move forward, to reach, to achieve. That pattern is ingrained in his nervous system, but when he encounters your patience, your intentional pauses, your willingness to stay present instead of rushing toward an ending, his system begins to shift. His breath deepens, his heart rate slows. The armor he didn't know he was wearing starts to loosen. Suddenly, it is no longer about getting somewhere. It is about being here, and in that space something long suppressed finally finds an exit. Emotions he learned to swallow, tension he never named, weight he carried without language. This is where the tears come, not from sadness, not from weakness, but from the shock of finally being allowed to feel. Now, some of you may be wondering, what if he resists? What if he laughs it off? What if he avoids it? Here is the truth. Men resist what they do not yet understand. At first he may expect performance, because that is all he has ever known. But if you remain consistent, if you continue to offer presence instead of pressure, if you show him again and again that you are not demanding anything from him, only offering space, eventually the resistance fades, and when it does, the change is unmistakable. You see it in his eyes, in the way his breathing matches yours, in how he holds you, not as a conquest but as a refuge. So let me leave you with this. When you slow everything down, when you replace urgency with intention, when you choose presence over performance, you awaken not just his body, but his soul. And once a man's soul has been touched in this way, no part of him ever forgets you. But this brings us to something even more powerful. If presence and patience are the foundation, how do you add the kind of emotional intensity that doesn't just make him surrender, but makes him fully give himself? Presence opens the door. Patience creates safety, but intensity is what fills the room. This is where unforgettable intimacy is born, not in the mechanics of movement, but in the electricity of connection. When a man cries after being with a woman, it is because the connection went beyond his body. It shook his mind, moved through his heart, touched a place he didn't know existed. And here is the truth you need to hear. You already have the power to take him there, not by doing more, but by being more real, more present, more unapologetically yourself. Emotional intensity is not drama, it is not chaos, it is not pressure, it is depth. It begins with your energy. Are you fully here with him, or are you distracted by how you look, how you sound, what you think he expects, because he can feel the difference? A man knows when you are almost present, and he knows when you are fully surrendered to the moment. When your body and your inner world align into one silent message, I choose this moment. I choose you. Not to prove anything, not to perform, but because of how this feels. That is intensity, and that is where everything changes. Think about your breath. The way you breathe can create more intensity than any movement ever could. Slow, deep, intentional breaths send a silent message. I'm grounded, I'm present, I'm open. Shallow, rushed, nervous breathing says something else entirely. I'm performing, I'm anxious, I'm trying. If you want to melt him, let him hear your calm. Let your inhale surround him. Let your exhale wrap around him like a quiet shelter. This rhythm teaches his body something it rarely learns, that there is no rush, that nothing needs to be proven, that he can follow you into deeper waters without fear. And the moment his body realizes it doesn't need to hurry, intensity doesn't fade. It multiplies. Now let's talk about your voice. Most women underestimate the power it holds. A whisper at the right moment. A soft sound that isn't forced but rises naturally. A word. Spoken not for effect, but for connection. These things bypass his mind and go straight to his chest. Men crave affirmation far more than they admit. They long for a place where they can feel desired without conditions, seen without expectation, wanted without pressure. When he hears, truly hears, that you are present with him, that you see him, that you want him exactly as he is in this moment, his defenses begin to fall. And when they fall, the tears that come are not weakness. They are freedom. But here is what most women never realize. Emotional intensity is not created by constant motion. It is created by stillness, by the pause that lasts slightly longer than he expects, by the silence that doesn't feel empty, but alive, by the moment where nothing happens and everything deepens. When you stop rushing and allow the moment to unfold, you let tension build in a way he has likely never experienced. This tension isn't about touch. It's about waiting, lingering, giving his emotions space to rise. And when they do, don't panic, don't laugh it off, don't pull away. Hold him, kiss his forehead. Show him, without words, that you can hold all of him. Not just his strength, but his softness too. I used to believe that intensity meant giving everything at once, full exposure, no restraint, but I learned something far more powerful. What stays with a man isn't excess, it's containment. Intensity comes from holding back just enough to guide him through waves of closeness and release. Approach, pause, retreat slightly, return again. This rhythm overwhelms not just his senses but his heart. It makes him think later. I didn't just touch her body, I touched something sacred. And here is my honest perspective. Men may act as if they want control, but deep down, many are waiting for someone to show them the beauty of surrender. They don't always have language for it, but when you give them permission to soften, to collapse safely, they remember you, not as the woman who impressed them, but as the woman who let them feel. And feelings leave deeper marks than pleasure ever could. So ask yourself, are you willing to slow down, to replace performance with intensity, to stop chasing perfection and start offering presence? Are you willing to let silence, breath, and patience become your most powerful tools? Because when you do, you'll discover something profound. It isn't just his body that responds, his soul does too. And when a man's soul is moved, that's when the tears fall, not from sadness, but from gratitude. Now here is the question I want to leave hanging in the air. After you've earned his trust, after you've built safety, after you've created intensity, how do you go even further? How do you become the woman he doesn't just desire for a night, but remembers for a lifetime? So far, you've seen how presence opens the door, how safety allows surrender, and how intensity makes him tremble. Now, we move deeper into what makes a connection impossible to replace. What turns a fleeting experience into a woman he will never forget has nothing to do with tricks, nothing to do with outperforming anyone he's been with before, nothing to do with comparison at all. It is about stepping into a role so rare that once he feels it, he can never return to the ordinary. That role is not the perfect lover. It is the unforgettable presence. When a man cries after intimacy, when his chest aches, not from what happened in the room, but from the depth of what he felt. It's not about the act. It's about who you became in his world. Men are raised inside a culture that constantly demands, be strong, provide, don't complain, don't hesitate, don't break. Most interactions skim the surface of that armor. Most women touch the man he performs as. But when you become the woman who sees beyond it, who doesn't just touch his body, but reaches the layers he spent years hiding, you give him something more precious than pleasure. You give him home. And home is not flashy. Home isn't loud. Home doesn't demand proof. Home is stable, grounded, a place he doesn't have to earn. That is why he returns. Not out of hunger, but out of longing. Let me share a perspective that changed everything for me. I used to believe being unforgettable meant being extraordinary in some external way. More beautiful, more skilled, more daring. But unforgettable isn't about being more. It's about being deeper. It's about creating experiences that bypass the mind and anchor themselves in memory. Think about what truly stays with you in life. It's never the spectacle. It's the subtle moments. The way someone looks at you when you aren't trying. The way they touch you when there's nothing to gain. The way silence is allowed to exist without being filled. These are not performances. They are invitations. And invitations last longer than displays. So how do you become that woman? First, consistency. Intensity matters, yes. But without consistency, intensity fades like fireworks. What makes you unforgettable is not one explosive night, but the way he feels in your presence every single time. If each encounter quietly communicates, you are safe here, you are wanted here, you don't have to prove anything here. His nervous system begins to anchor to you, and anchors are not easily forgotten. Second, vulnerability. Many women mistake strength for never showing softness, never needing reassurance, never revealing longing. But men do not bond with perfection. They bond with humanity. When you allow your own heart to be seen, when you let him notice that you too want to be held, you give him permission to step out of his role and simply be with you. Shared vulnerability creates bonds that physical pleasure alone never can. And third, reverence. This word is rarely used in intimacy, but it changes everything. Reverence means treating him not as an object of desire, but as a being worthy of care and respect. It's in how you touch him as if he matters, not just as a body, but as a person. It's in how you listen when he speaks, in how you hold space for his silence without demanding explanation. When a man feels reverence from a woman, when he realizes he is not just wanted, but valued, something inside him gives way. The tears that come then are not from pain or pressure. They come from the shock of being seen at the soul level. Now, some of you may be wondering, what if I offer all of this, and he doesn't meet me there? What if I give depth and he stays shallow? Here is the truth. Not every man is ready. Not every man will know what to do with this kind of presence. But the man who is ready, the man who has been yearning for more but doesn't know how to ask, will recognize you instantly, not logically, not with words. He will feel you in his chest before his mind can explain it. And once he feels that, you are no longer just a memory. You are a reference point. When a man finally understands why he feels what he feels with you, something irreversible happens inside him. At that point, forgetting you is no longer an option, because what you offered was never about chasing him, never about molding yourself into something impressive, never about performance, strategy, or comparison. Becoming unforgettable is about becoming a woman who knows her power, a woman who understands that presence is rare, that patience is seductive, that reverence is healing. It is about knowing deep in your body and your bones that you do not need to perform. You only need to be fully here, because once you show a man what it feels like to surrender completely, he no longer wants surface-level connection. He no longer wants to perform love. He wants to be present inside it. Once you give him the rare permission to feel, to soften without shame, to release without fear, to stop holding himself together, his tears are not weakness. They are relief. They are the body's response to healing. And this is the question I want to leave, suspended in your mind. If you can move someone this deeply, if your presence alone can open a man's heart to that degree, what does that say about how you see yourself as a woman? Because this was never just about intimacy, and it was never really about making a man cry after a night together. It was about redefining where your power actually lives. Most women were taught, explicitly or subtly, that their value lies in appearance, performance, and how well they can impress. We were taught to optimize ourselves, to perfect ourselves, to compete quietly. But your deepest power has nothing to do with performance. It lives in your ability to create a space where another human being feels safe enough to open, seen enough to soften, and loved enough to release everything they've been holding. That is power, not physical, not theatrical, but emotional, psychological, spiritual, unforgettable. Think about this honestly. How many people in his life truly give him permission to fall apart? How many allow him to be raw without fixing him, mocking him, or demanding he stay strong? The world demands his resilience. His career demands his discipline. Society demands his silence. Even his closest friends often only touch the surface. But you have the opportunity to be different. You can be the rare place where his armor is unnecessary. And when he feels that, when he realizes you are not another person asking him to perform, but someone inviting him simply to be, that is when his emotions finally break through. That is when the tears come, and that is when you become unforgettable. Here is the truth most people miss. Unforgettable intimacy does not begin in the bedroom. It begins long before. It begins in how you speak to him when no one is watching, in how you listen when he shares something small or seemingly insignificant, in how you show respect even when you disagree, in how you remain grounded instead of reactive. These moments quietly build a foundation of trust, so deep that when your bodies finally meet, his nervous system already knows it is safe to let go. His heart already knows it can breathe. That is why the moment feels overwhelming, because it is not just skin touching skin, it is soul meeting soul. I used to believe that being a powerful woman meant being untouchable, impeccable, always in control. But the most powerful women I have ever known are not the most guarded. They are the most present. They are the ones who dare to say, I am here. I see you, and I won't disappear when things get real. That is the power that transforms intimacy from performance into healing. That is the power that makes a man not just desire you, but revere you. So let me ask you directly, are you ready to step into that power? Are you ready to stop measuring yourself by standards that were never designed to honor your real strength? Are you ready to stop seeking approval and start embodying presence? Because the moment you do, you will realize something profound. You never needed to compete. You never needed to perform. You never needed to become someone else. You only needed to remember who you already are. And when you remember, everything changes. Everything changes. The way you touch him changes. The way you look at him changes. The way you carry yourself changes. You stop trying to win him and you begin allowing him to fall. You stop chasing connection and start creating space for it. You stop trying to impress and begin to invite. You stop treating intimacy as something to prove and start understanding that it is something to be. And the moment you embody that shift, something irreversible happens. He doesn't stay because you were perfect. He stays because you were real. He doesn't remember you because you overwhelmed him. He remembers you because for the first time, he was finally able to rest. That is why he cries. Not because you broke him, but because you gave him back to himself. You offered something no one else ever, or did. You gave him freedom. You gave him release. You gave him a place where his nervous system could finally exhale. You gave him home. And when a man experiences that, he doesn't just remember the moment. He remembers the woman who altered something inside him permanently. That is what makes you unforgettable. So let this sink in. Your power as a woman has never been about becoming someone else, not about copying performances, not about chasing perfection. Your power lives in presence. It lives in patience. It lives in your capacity to hold another human being so fully that something inside them collapses into gratitude. That is how you move him. That is how you soften him. That is how you touch places no one else reaches. And that is how you become unforgettable. But here is where the truth deepens. This was never only about him, because the same presence, patience, and reverence you offer a man must also be offered inward. If you can hold space for his heart, you can learn to hold space for your own. If you can love him into surrender, you can love yourself into freedom. And perhaps that is the real secret. An unforgettable woman is not only the one who moves a man to tears, she is the woman who has learned to meet her own tears with tenderness, who honors her own heart with reverence, who walks through life knowing her worth does not depend on performance, approval, or perfection. So ask yourself, honestly, gently, bravely, what would happen if you stopped performing and started being? If you stopped running and started feeling? If you stopped doubting and started remembering? Who would you become? And what kind of love would be possible if you chose to live from that place? That is the question. And the answer has the power to change everything.